Hello and welcome to The Time of Telling. I'm Mark Walker, and this podcast is based on my unpublished manuscript, The Time of Telling, John Star Cook and the Word of One Tarot. John Cook loved having people around, and people who knew him felt a real connection. His friend Anthony Lickiard once wrote to him, "I had an aunt who was like you. She was always enthusiastic about every single person she met." At the same time, however, there was the reality that once word got out about John's location, there would again be multitudes to feed. And this is exactly what he had moved down to Mexico to avoid. One day, some uninvited beats turned up, and John was able to put them off by telling them that his elder sister was coming to visit. He explained this ploy in a letter to Alice herself, while at the same time telling her that he wanted to resume the Ouija sessions. And at this point, I'm just going to pop that in there. Ouija. This is the way that John and the group referred to the Ouija board, the Ouija board. So John was wanting to resume the sessions. Rosalind had been in touch to report that she and Rom had held a few sessions on their own. Rosalind at this time was immobilised with a broken leg in her small upstairs Sausalito apartment. On the 22nd of April 1965, Rom came to visit. He walked across the Golden Gate Bridge since his car had broken down. And since the end of the Carmel sessions 18 months earlier, he had become very anti-esoteric and anti-occult, and declared he would never again use the Ouija board. However, at Rosalind's, he felt a very strong impulse out of the blue to try the Ouija board again. Together, they joined at the planchette. They were both seeking direction, and we gave them encouragement and advising that they were both still entwined with John. They held another session on the 1st of May. Rosalind asked whether she and Rom should go to Mexico to join John, and the answer was given, yes. The wound too tight watch unsprings now. A week later, Rom and Rosalind held another session. Question: does it matter if John/Legion welcomes us? Do we have to have his affirmation first? And we responds, he is not the mother calls. Question: but neither of us have any money, and we can't go unless we stay at his house. We have to be practical. We responds, to be practical is not practical. Do not hesitate. And to Rom, we says, your way says go, man, go. The way is paved with flowers blue. Rosalind/Gayla asked, does this message apply only to Rom? Is it for me also? We responds, a wall is in your way. Gayla/Rosalind says, what wall? We responds, a wailing wall. Tears squeezed for coin are unsalted. The wall should be assaulted. La gay one knows not walls. La gay one paves ways, not walls. John wanted Alice to come down for the sessions as well, and he wanted Rom to come. He said to Alice, I expect Nadine down also, and I don't know how all will fit into this house, but I trust timing and I'm not going to worry anymore. Tahiti and Pat Cassidy, on the other hand, and now these are two beat artists that John knew. Tahiti and Pat Cassidy, on the other hand, no, even them I must trust. And John continues to Alice, for I know that the time is soon coming in which there will be enormous change for all of us. John noted to Alice that Peter was doing great work with the Lamas in Rajput by organising a school. Rom and Rosalind held a final session in Sausalito on the 17th of May. We provided information about the motherland, Mexico, and gave words of advice and encouragement. About a week later, Rosalind arrived at John's home in Mexico, still in her cast and confined to the terrace and the mosquitoes. Rom had elected to drive his car, but the car had broken down and he had to complete the journey on bus. Rom arrived on the 27th of May. On the 28th of May, the sessions resumed, with session 80. 3 of the original 5 were present, Given, Legion, and Gala, and there were 3 guests, Martin, Fausto, and Marianne, a Cuernavaca artist. It had been 15 months since the group had last met at Amaranthus. What great changes had already been wrought since the first session. The feeling that John's group had professed that there was something great to come in the wake of the Great Aquarius alignment of February 1962 was borne out by the group's creation of the Word of One Tarot. But what more was there to learn from one? Marianne asked the question, what has to happen? We responds, a new birth is best explanation, words only. We offers aspects of the doctrine of one consciousness and a name for Martin, Sweet Timothy. John's question indicated what was on his mind. He asked, please say more about the South move to Mexico, Rom's coming, hints about now. You said that the impractical was practical. Well, I've been put on the spot. What are we all up to? We offered calm assertions and observations with advice and encouragement. There were observations about the motherland. Both Rom and Rosalind had reverted to their board-given names, Given and Gala. And John had never abandoned his board name, Legion. Martin had been given the name Sweet Timothy, however, he had little interest in the Ouija board. 6 days later, another session was held, with tales, advice, assertions, and answers to questions. The tall ones were discussed, and once again, information was sought about LSD. A few days later, Given, Legion, and Gala held a session. We revealed more aspects of the doctrine of one consciousness. And then Alice flew down for a short visit and came to session 83 on the 14th of June, with Given, Legion, Gala, Sweet Timothy, and another visitor, Wacom. We told of a coming new awareness that will endure when all else fails, and of aspects of the one consciousness doctrine. There were some individual questions, and the tall ones were again discussed. Now, the few days following this session saw events described as completely sudden and cataclysmic, like the arrival of an unheralded storm. Whatever these events were, when Alice departed for home, Rosalind and sweet Timothy / Martin went with her, and Rom / Given remained behind. John was taking drink at this point, and so was Rosalind. So a plausible scenario might be that Rosalind and John were both under the influence, and that John gave voice to some of the misgivings he held about Rosalind, but which he had previously confided only in letters to Alice. The departure of Martin, sweet Timothy, who had been John's support worker for a year, is perhaps the cataclysmic event. John needed him. Perhaps Martin was exasperated with John's behaviour and his attitudes towards Rosalind, and that evening had been the final straw, with Given / Rom stepping in to the role. Martin returned in early August, staying for a few weeks before leaving for Bolinas in California. Given and John held session 84, with visitors Dio and Laurie, formerly of Big Sur, who had arrived a couple of days before the others departed for California. We described a 23rd book, The Wanderer, and had some advice for John. Be one as you are one. In the midst of legion is one. In one is legion. A couple of days later, John wrote to Alice and directed her to give some money to Rosalind. Session 85 came on the 27th of June with two visitors, Kate and Holly, we offering advice and parables. The next day, John related to Alice that his LSD experiences had enabled him to look back on his odd life and to see the work of one through all of it. Session 86 on the 30th of June involved Given, John, and the Caudrys, who were keen weavers and unwitting subjects of John's 3-act comedy, The Swimming Pool, which still exists, although I've not seen it. John wrote to Alice on the 3rd of July. The gala business becomes more and more unfortunate. I agree that Mendocino would be far better, but wherever she lands is going to be tough on the personality. Further sessions with further pairs of visitors follow, with more advice, parables, assertions, and aspects of one consciousness. Session 87 on the 3rd of July with Given and John saw them with fresh letters from Alice, Rosalind, and sweet Timothy, and we tackled their questions. On the 12th of July, John told Alice, Saturday night, after and during a 24-hour Barber silence, we took the sun at this 8,000-foot altitude. Quite an experience for both. Today, we, John and Given, are off to Guatemala. So the 24-hour Barber silence is Meher Baba had his followers, who we referred to as lovers, engage in periodic periods of silence. Moving on, John and Given flew down to Guatemala to visit John's relatives Neil and Kenny, and on the 13th of July held a session there during the full moon. We delivered answers to individual questions and aspects of the one consciousness doctrine. John and Given were back from Guatemala by the 23rd of July and held a session with Dio and Laurie who had been minding the house in their absence, and Janus. We gave advice and expounded love as the movement of one. Session 90 on the 28th of July was with Given, Legion, and 3 visitors, Janus, Lem, and Geoffrey, and saw John seeking answers on the gypsies and their origin before moving on to the mystery of various letters of the alphabet. A tale was told and advice given. John was having a fine time. He wrote to Alice on the 2nd of August. So many strange and beautiful experiences on LSD recently. We were the wanderers who went from universe to universe, like an eternal river line, to keep knowledge alive through Ouija boards, tarot cards, and G-force. And then, on the other hand, in another letter to Alice, John wrote, or in the same letter rather, 3 nights later, 25 mottled souls, disguised as maggots and leprechauns, tore up this place on LSD 25. Well, that was interesting. A good research experiment, which need not be repeated again. Sweet Timothy flew down from California for a visit and stayed for session 91 alongside Kate, Holly, Marianne, and Luther. We spoke of the subtlety of great events, and that once the movement of one is acknowledged, full stature is achieved as a tall one. Session 92 on the 9th of August was held with Given, Legion, and Sweet Timothy. We was questioned on Meher Baba and on how to find the self. And at this point, Michael Bowen re-enters the narrative. Michael, with his friend Big Bill Fortner, turned up at John's house, and that's where we will leave it for today. Thank you very much for watching. This is The Time of Telling.